The Mahabharata is the story of a pivotal war at a pivotal time. The most ancient of Indian texts, the holy Vedas, posit vast cycles of astronomical time called yugas, which determine the very character of an age. To simplify, these cycles are 4 in number, 28,000 years long, declining in virtue until a state of corruption when the world is destroyed, only to be created over again and again and again and again. The last age, Kali Yuga, is the one in which we now live, when things are at their most degenerate, people at their most wicked. But it began, according to the Vedas, 14,000 years ago, when that great battle of Kurukshetra was fought, the battle around which the Mahabharata revolves.
Was there ever such an era or such a battle? If there was one, when was it? And how preposterous are Brahmin students who place it way before recorded history began?
It's customary to view ancient Egypt as the world's longest continuous civilization. It's a view we inherited from the Greeks and Romans, who really knew little beyond the world of the Mediterranean.
The first to see it was Alexander the Great, and something he encountered there dissuaded him from adding India to his empire. Instead, he turned his vast army around and returned west, by all accounts a changed man.
But our ignorance of the vast age of India's civilization was due even more to a tendency to view Europe, our world, as the heart of life on Earth, an expedient that was self-serving during the heady days of empire.
We still think that all other civilizations were of minor quality. And this is perhaps why we still have difficulties in accepting that in the Indian subcontinent something developed which was even more important than all the early civilizations.
Janssen is one of the very few Western scientists drawn to an area which, when fully explored, will force history to be rewritten. Found only by chance in the early 1920s by British scholars looking for traces of Alexander the Great. But those were years of spectacular discoveries elsewhere. In Egypt, Tutankhamun's tomb was found, and by comparison what was dug up in India seemed crude and uninteresting, so hardly anyone took notice.
Because it was not sensational enough. The Indus Valley did not bring discoveries like big gold treasuries. So
is it sensational?
Yes, it is very much so. The Northwest Indian area was an area which was very early already inhabited. Here we have now trades which go back to the 8th millennium, and it has a very, very long tradition, which we only know since 10 years, and it should be much more publicized and should get much more public awareness.
Towns in hundreds, arising 7, even 8,000 years before Christ, millennia before Egypt and Mesopotamia, with which we begin our history. Long before the first pharaoh united Egypt, a vast civilization centered on a twin river system in the Indus Valley, the Indus itself and the great river Sarasvati, now vanished. One of the centers was Mohenjo-Daro, now found to be the largest archaeological site in the world.
Mohenjo-Daro could have easily covered 70,000-80,000 inhabitants. The spread is for more than 1 million square kilometers in the northwest Indian parts. This makes it the largest civilization in the 3rd millennium. It's bigger than Mesopotamia and even Egypt.
We are now just beginning to get a glimpse of how extraordinary this civilization was. 3-story dwellings with running water, cold and hot, as well as a sewage system and elaborate, wide roads. A model of sophisticated urban planning. And scientists are stunned by another fact.
We don't have any traits of absolutistic rulership, neither by profane nor sacred power. For example, as we have in Egypt, where you have the pharaoh, who is God and earthly ruler in the same person. But instead of that, big cities for 40, 50, 60,000 people, constructed of the brick as we use it nowadays, proportion 1 to 2 to 4, they didn't use any other material. So it's a very modern engineering, architectural thinking behind which is stunning us nowadays. We cannot identify temples or palaces. The political the structure must have been very much dominated by the burghers themselves. If we identify civilization as rulership by the people themselves, it definitely was the cradle of civilization.
Not shock of invasion, but climate change cut short the cities of the Indus Valley. The great Sarasvati dried up. Desertification drove people deeper into India. Only centuries later, Aryan groups rode in, gradually blending in with the population. Mohenjo-daro was deserted after floods. These sand dunes is where once the great Sarasvati river ran. India's epicenter shifted east to the mighty Ganges River.